two questions for you. Personally, do you think the amendments of the Film Act represents a liberalization of political space in Singapore? If so, to what extent and what?
I think let me answer the first two questions. I think I am personally very encouraged, and I had mentioned this previously, that Parliament has opened a social space, which is much needed, given the development in our country and given the development in the area of technology. That space carries with it a couple of other things. The first is it carries with it responsibility on the part of the applicant. It carries responsibility on the part also of the PFCC. The responsibility on the part of the applicant is to ensure that the films that they make, the films that they submit to us, contain materials which are exempted under the Act. The responsibility on the part of the committee is to give very serious objective consideration to the film made by the applicant. Whether the PFCC, in its role as an advisory body, would make any difference, I think the answer would be yes. You remember that this is an aided layer. You remember also that the recommendations of AIMS was to open up the space. And AIMS had suggested that with the opening up the space, that the matter be considered by an independent group of citizens. So although we are advisory in our deliberations, I think the advice of the committee would need to be given much weight by the PFC. I think that would be the intent of what Parliament had proposed in the Films Amendment Act.
Yes, Aaron from Straits Times.
Yes, sir.
I have two questions as well. One is initially when the AIMS recommendations were released to the public, big concern was with the harmful nature of films. At that point, after that, there was only one film at the Singapore level. And you talked about opening up the space.
Yes.
So in your opinion, if that film had gone through this process you just described, would it still pass? That's the first question. Second question is, you also talked about how the PFCC is a group of independent citizens.
Yes.
And how its advisory role needs to be independent from the government making a recommendation.
Yes.
And the AIMS also had said that one problem with this PFCC is that it's open to public scrutiny. What you do will set the tone for future such committees.
Yes.
So how would you propose in ensuring that your committee remains independent? Would you be making your recommendations public for people to read, and how you came to your decision on certain films?
Yeah, I think those are good questions. Let me address the first one. The first question that you asked is the harmful impact of films and whether the opening up of the space would constrain it. I think the first point that I would like to make is that social space is now being opened. It is an incremental step. I think if you read the speech of the Minister in Parliament, as well as the various comments made by others, you know that this is an incremental step. So in a sense, we are in a social experiment, and I think it's a good experiment to be in. Whether or not the films would be harmful or otherwise is decided on the basis of the criteria which is being set out in the Act itself. And we have gone to clarify this and make it clearer to the applicant. When they make an application, they would then address their minds fully to whether the films would meet the criteria of an exempted party political film or otherwise. So it is quite clearly laid out in the statute. The second question is the issue of the public scrutiny of the decisions that we make. I think at the end of the day, the credibility of the PFCC depends on the decision that it makes. I think that is an accepted viewpoint. As I said earlier on, the responsibility on the part of the PFCC to look at it rigorously, objectively, and independently. On the other side of the coin, we also welcome the responsibility on the part of the applicant to provide as much information as possible, because the applicant would have thought about making the film, why he has made the film, the expenses that he has incurred in making the film, and there must be a reason why the applicant wants the films to be exhibited publicly. And we want to know why he has done that. And there is therefore a dialogue between ourselves and the applicant in regard to that. And the questions that may arise may be in regard to seeking an understanding of the applicant's viewpoint and perspective. So that's one issue in regard to giving the matter quite independent, and therefore a matter which is then potentially open for public scrutiny. As Pearl had mentioned, the final decision, of course, will be the PFC. And we suspect that the PFC, in turning down an application or in approving an application, I think may give reasons why they do so one way or the other, based on the recommendations of the PFCC. In other words, the final decision is the BFC. Our role is to make those recommendations to the BFC. There is, in addition to that, if anybody is unhappy with the decision of the BFC, there is an appeal process, and that goes to another appellate body. I think you have got a diagram in regard to the new workflow, and that is another body that provides another added layer into looking at the films itself. So I think there are many checks and balances within the process itself already. And the members of the appeal body, again, comprise of members of the public.
What are some of the challenges that you foresee the committee will be facing in taking up your role?
I think the first challenge is that it is a new area for us. It's a new area for us. It's a new norm also for the applicant. We are looking at this. We are walking the journey together, the applicant as well as the committee. So that's a new challenge. We want to be as independent in our assessment, and our objectivity will depend upon how much information we actually get from the applicant. We would encourage the applicant to be completely honest in giving the information. We would expect the applicant to have complete integrity in providing the information. And that will be something that we are looking for. And we hope that will happen. That will happen to us. In other words, let's walk this journey together, both the applicant and the committee, and see how we can really define the social space that has been opened up by Parliament. So that's a challenge for us too. And we see that as something that may happen almost as soon as the first application comes in. Yeah. Morning.
Since you are in this media and film industry, do you think that given the guidelines that is currently laid out, that people funding films will find it profitable, to create a political film? Do you think that there is a market for this with the kind of guidelines that is set out in Singapore compared to places like America, where movies like Fahrenheit are so well?
Okay, thank you. I've been in the film business for just over 10 years. And in these 10 years, we've seen how the whole landscape for film has changed progressively. As a filmmaker and as a producer, and working with scriptwriters and directors, I've also seen how over the years, the kind of the envelope that we were pushing, the limits that we were pushing in censorship and in various areas of how a film is made, the kind of limits, and how the limits have been slowly evolving. I mean, I really am very encouraged, and I welcome this new space, which I have said is actually a space that is grounded on maturity. I mean, we use the word maturity a lot in right now because I think the landscape has changed, and with maturity comes responsibility and accountability for both the filmmaker on one side and on the other side the people who set the rules. You are asking about whether the new space will allow for more political films that can be viable. I think that the answer is definitely yes. I think, in fact, over the years, we have seen filmmakers looking at subject matters that is progressively we're treading into areas that previously we have not treaded before, and some of these areas may in the past be considered very sensitive. Right now it may be considered actually very open for interpretation, and like I said, it's again grounded on understanding of the sensitivity, but also having a sense of maturity. So I think a new space would definitely be important, and as filmmakers, we encourage this new space, and I think this new space would actually allow for a lot more subject matters that previously probably would not have been covered before. And I think it will go a long way to demystify certain myths about what can and cannot be done in this part of the world.
Let me sort of add on to what Daniel had mentioned. The amendments to the Films Act deals with content regulation. And content regulation is present in the country that you mentioned. In the US, it's present. Content regulation is present in Europe. Content regulation is present in Australia. Content regulation is present in UK. The issue for us is, where does the balance lie? It is not as if the position in all these countries are actually static. They are also refining and redoing their own social policies in regard to content regulation. One of the basic principles inherent or underlying the content regulation in these countries are essentially the integrity of the information. I think that's important for us to realize, and honesty in the presentation of the content. Those are the two principles that seems to underlie the various content regulation in some of these countries. I think Daniel has responded to you in terms of market viability. I think from the position yesterday when the Act was not enforced and the position today, the space has already opened up. And therefore, whilst we did not have a market yesterday, we have a market today. And I think that's important for us to recognize how deep the market is going to be, how broad the market is going to be. Actually goes back again to what Daniel mentioned, the maturity of the market, and the responsibility on the part of the market, the responsibility on the part of the Films Committee, the PFC, I think, in regard to that. So this is an opportunity that we have, and I think we, as I said, we walk this journey together in this particular area. Yes.
If a film has been denied by the Board of Film Censors,
yes,
the applicant can appeal to the Film Appeals Committee.
Yes.
Would this committee have an influence over the FAC?
This committee means PFCC. No, I think the PFCC's responsibility ends at the time when it makes its views known to the BFC. Then the BFC will make a decision having regard to our views. I'm sure they're taking consideration to our views. Then I suspect what will happen is the Appeals Committee will then look at the reasons given by the PFC, which would have in turn considered the reasons that we had in fact given. Whether the Appeals Committee will now go back directly and ask the PFCC for their views, I doubt very much, because the process is slightly different. I think they will go back to the BFC to seek whatever views they decide to seek. I don't think they can sort of jump the hurdle to us. I don't think that's also quite the right process, I think, in regard to this particular matter.
It's a political film. You decide whether it is allowed under the current film,
Sure.
the new film. But what happens if I take not political film and DFC sends it to you? Do you have to make the judgment as to whether it's a political film in the first place? If it is, how will you decide whether it's a political film as opposed to being a political film that's allowed under the concept?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. I think first of all, this committee is only concerned with party political films. We're not concerned with the regular films. I think that's the first step. And in deciding whether a film is a party political film, which is allowed or disallowed, I think we would have to go back to the provisions in the legislation. The legislation has spelled out what is stated there. And if you look at the criteria in the legislation, there are quite a number of explicit requirements that's provided there. And the explanation that has been provided to by the minister in the second reading provides an elaboration and a clarification of what this criteria actually meant. So the committee, this particular committee, PFCC, will then be guided by what is stated in the legislation and what has been clarified in Parliament in regard to the way that it should be interpreted. Well, there will be grey areas. When you talk about vagueness, you're talking about the grey areas. And that is why you need an independent body to look at it and to be able to assess the film to see whether it's allowable or not allowable. If it is so explicit, you don't require an independent body to be in existence. It may just pass muster, on its own. And that's, I think, the challenge that we also talked about when I stated that early on, that this is going to be the challenge really to define where we are in terms of the boundaries in regard and the way that we interpret the legislation. Yeah.
Asia from today's newspaper.
Yes.
Just want to check with you. Earlier you mentioned the two underlying principles that is essential in the content regulations. Are these two principles the underlying principles that the committee will be holding on to as well?
Yeah.
And also, do you have examples of political films that would be passed by the committee abroad or local?
Okay, I think if you look at the scheme of the Act, at the bottom of the scheme of the Act, if you had read the recommendations of AIMS, I think underlying the social philosophy is integrity. I think that's important for us to recognize, and openness in regard to the kind of films that is being submitted, the information that is required, and things of that sort. So I think that is an assumption that we will look at. It is, of course, expressed in different ways in terms of elaboration under the Act. If the question is whether we will be looking at integrity and honesty, the answer is yes, as spelled out in the Act itself, expressed in the Act. To give an example of a film that will pass muster, I think, Alicia, that is still an hypothetical question. Let us look at the films and then we decide. Remember that these are all independent-minded committee members. They come with their wealth of experience and their own opinion. And I think I would like to respect them and defer that view really to them. I suspect there'll be a robust discussion in-house in regard to looking at film. If you look at their credentials, they have got their own viewpoints and their own perspectives, and I think it'll be an interesting time in the committee. So.